Hi, my name is Jeffrey Way, and my package Laravel Guard makes the process of compilation, concatenation, and minification as easy as humanly possible in a Laravel application. So let me show you how to use it. You're going to install it through Composer. So if I switch over to Sublime Text, I have a brand new installation of Laravel. The only thing I've done is the initial Composer install. So now I'm going to switch over to Composer JSON, and I will say for development, I require the package Way, guard Laravel, and let's get the dev master. And that's it. So now I will switch back to the terminal and run composer update the development dependencies. Now, while that's installing, if I switch back to the GitHub page, you'll see that there's a README that'll tell you everything you need to do. But basically, it's just a matter of adding the dependency and then adding the service provider to your app configuration file. And this is going to be true for any Laravel specific package. So if I switch back, that has now pulled in the package. So let's go ahead and add that configuration file and we'll be all set to go. Within app, we will scroll down here and add the new service provider. And that's it, we're all set to go. So now if I run PHP Artisan, you're going to see these three new commands, guard make, refresh, and watch. Most of the time, you're going to only use make and watch. So let me give you an example of how to use this. Let's begin by generating a guard file, PHP Artisan, guard make. So what it's immediately going to do is ensure that you have all of the plugins necessary. So it'll say, okay, do you have the guard gem? If not, I'm going to install that automatically for you. And that way you don't have to figure out that process. But in this case, I have all of the default plugins. Next, it's going to ask me, do I want CSS preprocessing? Well, for now, let's just say no. And CoffeeScript, no, I don't want that as well. So even though I selected no to preprocessors, if I switch back to the guard file, you will see that it adds a handful of guards. Now, the idea behind this package is unless you're adding your own custom guards, never edit the guard file. And that's because this is going to be generated for you dynamically. All right, so now that we have a guard file installed, we're going to start watching the file system for changes. So I can run artisan guard watch, or a shortcut would just be guard. All right, and that's it. So now I can switch over and let's try a few things out. I'm going to open up the public directory and create a new file within CSS, and we will call it main.css. Body, the width is 80%, margin is auto, and the background will be a grayish color. So now if I save that, you'll immediately see that it creates this new style.min file, and it will compress all of that down. But it's actually doing more than that. It's concatenating all of the files within your CSS directory and then minifying them. So here's another example. Let's create one for buttons.css, buttons, or perhaps singular. And then we will say background is red, border radius is 30 pixels. So as soon as I save that, once again, those files are going to compile and then they're going to compress. So now you see button and then body. Excellent. So all of this is being done automatically for you. And the exact same thing is going to happen for your JavaScript. So let's see how we might reference this within our view. I'm going to switch over to the routes file. And for the home route, we're just going to return the hello view. So within the hello view, let's just add a bit of HTML. And within here, I will say hello world. And now I want to link to that style sheet. Well, this package includes two helpers. So let's just start with style sheet and see what that gives us. Okay, well, I will switch back to the terminal, create a new tab, and boot up a server. Now, if I view the source, you can see when we run that style sheet global function, by default, it's going to include the minified style sheet. And the same is going to be true for your scripts. So you have style sheet and you would also have script, which you could place at the bottom of your page. Now, if you do need to specify an argument, that's going to be relative to your CSS directory. So if we want to pull in the main.css file, we would just type it like that, main.css. And if I reload the page, now you will see that we are pulling in that CSS file. And also notice while we're here that it's automatically running your PHP unit tests. And I have specified that when I edit a view file, I do want to run those tests. So if we see in this case, if I look at example test, the test is failing because it's expecting to see hello world exclamation point. So if I remove that, save it, the test will automatically run, and now we will be back to green. Now I'm going to return this back to including the minified style sheet, and now I want to see some auto updating. So if I switch this over to the side and the browser to the left, I'm going to turn on live reload. And one thing that was installed when you set up this package is a live reload guard. So now If I reload the page, start live reload, I'm going to change this to hello universe, and that's immediately going to update in the browser. And this is true. I can edit main.css, so maybe we're going to make the color even darker and specify a color of white. That's going to concatenate with button.css, and then the browser is going to update. Let's go back and maybe add a button with a class of button, and we'll say click me. That's automatically going to update. So you see, this is a really easy way to make changes very quickly. So already we have the automatic concatenation and minification of our assets. But what about when you need special settings? For example, it's using the defaults of a JS folder and a CSS folder. But what if you want maybe a folder name of JavaScripts or style sheets? Well, in those cases, you need to edit the configuration options. And to do that, you only need to do this once per project. We are going to publish the configuration for the package that you installed through Composer. So now what that's going to do is add a new configuration file to your packages directory right here. So here you can see you can specify where is the JavaScript path, where is the CSS path, where is the assets path, and that would be when you're adding Sass or CoffeeScript or less, what directory should those be placed in. Next we come to the JS concat and CSS concat options. Now remember when I said that as soon as you edit a CSS file, it's going to be concatenated and minified into this style.min.css file. But often this won't be ideal. What it's essentially doing is running a glob on your CSS directory, and it'll grab all of those files even within subfolders. But chances are you need to control the order, especially for your JavaScript. You're going to have dependencies. So maybe file 2 depends on file 1, and file 3 depends on file 2. Well, you need to make sure that they are concatenated in that specific order. So when that is the case, you can override this setting. So here you can see it's going to grab all files from the CSS directory recursively. Instead, I'm going to switch that out so that I can manually specify the files. So now we're going to include main and buttons. So a couple conventions to take note of, and they're all noted right here. Again, this is going to be relative to what you specify as the CSS path. So for example, if I change this to style sheets, well then it's going to try to load style sheets /main.css and style sheets /button.css. This just makes it a little bit easier, and you can leave off the extension. Now, whenever you're coding, you want to make sure that you are watching the file system for changes. Just make this a basic part of your workflow. Then, when you edit files like this, your guard file is automatically going to update. And to give you an example, if I come back to guard file, you'll see right here where we specify a list of all files that should be concatenated. Now you can see that the order has been updated. But like I said, you don't really need to worry about the guard file. You can ignore it mostly. So now if I go back, we save a file. If we take a look at the minified version, now you can see they are being concatenated in the correct order. So let's say maybe you want to add another one for layout.css, and we'll just say grid, width is 100%. Now if I save that, because we've made an edit, it's no longer automatically going to update. And that's because you specified in your configuration file that you want to have control over the order. So now, whenever you add a new file, you would just update it right here. So maybe we'll say main, then the layout file, then buttons. Or maybe if you have a vendor directory, maybe, for example, you have vendor normalize.css, and we'll just use a dummy class to represent the normalize library. Well, then, at the very top, you would say vendor normalize, like so. So now I will save that. Your guard file is automatically going to be updated. So then anytime you make an edit, once it's concatenated, now you get normalize, then you get body, then at the end you get grid, and then followed by buttons. So that's a good way to control the order. But then at this point, it's just business as usual. Take advantage of the live reload plugin, make some edits, and watch them update in the browser. So the final thing we're going to take a look at is using preprocessors. So for example, I'm going to exit out, and once again, I'm going to create a new guard file. We're going to start over. Guard make. Once again, it's going to make sure I have all of the prerequisite gems installed. This time I do want CSS preprocessing, and I'm going to choose Sass. In this case, it's noting, hey, you don't have the guard Sass gem, so I'm going to install that for you. So that'll just take a few seconds, and it will only happen once. Now, CoffeeScript, yeah, let's get that as well. All right, so let's switch back. Now you'll see that we have this new assets directory and a coffee and Sass folder. So let's go ahead and start watching the file system, because if we want these files to be compiled, well, we need to be watching them for changes. Just think of it that way. All right, so once again, we're going to say Sass, and let's just begin by getting rid of all of the CSS files. We're going to start from scratch here. Once again, create a file called main.sass, and we will say body, background is red. Now, when I save this, it's going to detect the change. So if I switch over to the terminal, you'll see it is reloading the browser, and it did compile that. Now, I can switch over to the CSS file, and that did work. Great. But again, remember when I noted that you can update the folder paths? Maybe you want your CSS directory to be style sheets. Well, we will update that. Your guard file is automatically going to recognize the changes. And here I have some notifications set up to show me. But now when I save the file, if I switch back over, you'll see that now it creates a style sheets directory instead. But then at this point, you're just using Sass like you normally would. Buttons.sass, button, border, radius is 50 pixels. Save it. Now I come back. You'll see we have buttons and main. And chances are, if you are using a preprocessor, then you would be importing instead. So import buttons, save that, and once again, it's going to compile. And if I switch back to main, now you'll see that it's bringing in both of those. So the same thing is going to be true for CoffeeScript. Module.coffee, and we'll just say class mod, save it. If I come back, now within the JS directory, we have a new mod file. So all of this compilation is free. It only took one command. So the final thing I want to demonstrate is how you can have a little bit more control over the configuration of these guards. So for example, notice how with main.css, it did compile it, but maybe I want it to be compressed instead. How might you do that? Well, if I switch over to the guard file, you'll see that each of these are their own plugins that you can find on GitHub. So guard concat or guard PHP unit, or if I scroll down, guard Sass. So if you ever want to view the configuration options for the Sass plugin, just search on GitHub for guard Sass. I happen to know, though, that it offers an option for compressed output. So I'm not going to edit my guard file, I'm going to edit my configuration file. And if I scroll down to the bottom, you'll see that there's a guard options. So within here, you'll specify a key for the name of the plugin. In this case, it's Sass or CoffeeScript, and then make that correspond to an array of your options here. We can see for the Sass method, and again, if I switch back, we're just grabbing it right there. There's the Sass method. So I'm going to say the configuration options are line numbers. Let's get rid of that. But I do want the style to be compressed. So now your file is going to auto-update. If I save this one more time, and we switch back to main, now you'll see it is updated with those settings. So the most important thing to remember with all of this is if you make a change and you're not seeing it updated or compiled or concatenated like you would hope, there's two possibilities. One, switch over to the terminal and see if there is some error. Maybe you made a typo, maybe something's wrong and it can't do its job. Or two, make sure that you are watching the file system. If I exit out, and by the way, you can hit E to exit out. If I make a change here, body background to green, and I save that, nothing, of course, is going to happen. And we can see that right here. It's still set to red. And that's because you want to make sure that you are watching the file system for changes. That's the only way it can tell. So now if I save it, it will compile down again, and now it's back to working. So I hope you enjoy this. So if you notice any bugs, be sure to file them on GitHub. Have fun.